Welcome to Amazing Indiana Music Stories.
My name is David Andrichik. I'm the owner of the Chatterbox since 1982, and this is my amazing Indiana music story. My college degree was in architecture from University of Illinois in Champaign. I was married at the time, and when my wife and I graduated, separate degrees and so on, we moved to Indianapolis because she got a job first. I got a job about 2 weeks later as an architect working for someone else, graduate architect. Then I became an apprentice, continuing to work for various architectural firms until I was able to take a licensing test here for state of Indiana, passed that and became a registered architect, and actually changed jobs at that time too. But core in Indiana, Indianapolis, the city capital, the state capital, and I evolved into liking and enjoying historic architecture. And within the firm, I evolved into doing historic preservation, new additions in schools, but then restoring and renovating the old school buildings in the state for different uses. So repurposing them, restoring them historically, and then adding the new facilities that were necessary. So that's how I evolved within my architectural degree and career to move towards historic preservation. Within the large firm I worked for, there was a summer intern who was going to architecture school for an architectural history degree in Ball State. And she was the daughter of the controller of the company. And since a friend of mine and I, we were the unofficial/official social directors, we planned all the parties. We were all kids, late 20-somethings, that sort of thing. And we had a lot of fun and got to know each other pretty well. And the project she worked on over the summer was to take the entirety of Massachusetts Avenue in downtown Indy, 1 mile long, and then document it so that it could be put on the National Register of Historic Places. The entire avenue from the 300 block up to the 900 block was going to be put on that. This was her summer project. She was getting credit for it. Ball State got the contract to do it, and there were other things happening. But in casual discussion about wanting to have an interest in buying a downtown building, she put me in touch with this incredible developer that I didn't know, called and left a message. His name was Scott Keller. He called me back about a day and a half later, and essentially lectured me for a half an hour on the phone, said that if you want to buy along Mass Avenue, you will be among great bigger developers that will develop all around you, and your investment will be relatively safe as it can be. And there's a particular building that the owner only wants to sell it with a bar and the liquor license and the business. It's essentially his retirement. I don't want that. We don't want liquor license. We want other kinds of buildings, and it's too small for us to deal with. And it's called Chatterbox, and you should go and visit it. The address is 435 Mass Avenue. So that kind of started it all. At that same time, 2 other buddies of mine at the firm were interested in purchasing with me as a group to do this, and they eventually dropped out. It was my money I was earning and saving and putting away for an investment, and it was their wives' money that did that. So they eventually pulled out when it was getting longer and longer for the purchase and so on. So we purchased the building from Bill Popa, was the previous owner's name. It had been called the Chatterbox since 1939. No music, it was a shotgun bar, 18 feet wide, 45 feet long. Opened at 7:30 in the morning for the after work third shift. That's what the people that lived in the neighborhood, and closed about 7:30 at night for the after work first shift people. That was the business that I was buying, and it was a retail business selling beer and wine and liquor by the glass or the shot. And also he had a carry-out license. It's an old, it's called a 210 license. He also had carry-out. So the back bar was stacked with uh, liters of various liquors that people would come and buy carry-out for the weekend. That time bars were not allowed to be open on Sundays. So May of '82, and I'm learning the business. When we closed on the deal on Meridian Street in the Chamber of Commerce building, Bill and his attorney and me and my attorney walked back to the Chatterbox. I went behind the bar with him. We counted out all the money in the cash drawer. I think it was $143. I wrote him a check for it. I put it back in. He went on the other side of the bar and said, I want a Seagram 7 and a Budweiser. And that was that afternoon, May, I think 20 or 21. I'm spacey on that right now, in 1982. So I had to learn the business. I'd never been a bartender. I'd been a server in college, in a restaurant, in a sorority. Excuse me. So I was beginning and had to learn, number one, the idiosyncrasies of my customers and the fact that I had to manage those hours. I had to hire a manager that was there early in the morning because I was still working full-time as an architect. And in doing so, got to connect with someone. But then when I would come back after my business day, which would be 5:30, 6:30 or whatever, we would be closing. That was the normal thing. And that wasn't fun to be able to enjoy my investment. So I began talking to people about adding something later so we could eventually be open later in the evening and so on. And I figured on there was no other live music downtown. Um, and I always had a favorite music style, which was jazz or R&B or blues. Again, that's in college, listening to college radio and going to concerts and campus stuff. Historically, parents had records, big band records, Frank Sinatra stuff, Dean Martin stuff, and the big bands. And those were influences on why I liked that music. Through my connections and just becoming involved because I'm still working for someone, they're asking me to volunteer out in the city for various organizations. And I begin to do that and make additional connections, not just within the architectural firm, within the greater community of Indianapolis, and found out about a blues player. Her name was Mary Mike Adams, blues guitarist. And she was essentially the first live entertainment we had. I forget how many times during the week or how long it was, but through the first 6 to 9 months, we added various people there just to test to see if the music would work, if customers would come in. And there was one particular time, Mary Mike is still here in the city and a friend. I said, Mary Mike, can you're playing blues all the time and they're really, really sad blues. I mean, there are more syncopated blues and more upbeat blues and still have blues. And she said after our exchange, I guess you're firing me. I said, no, Mary Mike, that's not what I'm saying. She said, well, that's all I play. She said, let me talk to my boyfriend and see. He has a jazz group and he's a saxophone player. And he can probably put something together. And that person was Mark Radway, saxophone player. And I made the contact with him through Mary Mike. And we continued to then enjoy the jazz music that was coming in, various groups that were there, and we worked it that way. So within the first 18 months, we worked up to 6 nights a week of live music. Bars were not allowed to be open on Sundays, so we didn't have music. That was the day you were closed. So that's the origin of Purchase, why I got the music in the first place, to make it fun for me and my contemporaries to come after work and later on, especially on the weekends, and to then begin to learn about the jazz community here in the city. I did not know about it. I went in saying, I want to buy a building. It's got to be historic. I want to be here. And then I had to figure out how to do it. Well, again, it's kind of guardrails of my ideas, meaning I made a critical review of Mary Mike, but it would be like that. We bring people in. Those days you didn't have demos or EPs or anything like that. It was just, are you playing somewhere else? I can go and see you. And generally it was like private parties and stuff like that, because Indiana Avenue was hardly any music at all and hardly any jazz. Only Madam Walker was there, and it was not restored like it is today. All the little clubs along Indiana Avenue that nurtured that entire community for jazz were no longer in existence, or they were just going out of existence. Much of it, like all cities in America, white flight to the suburbs. So their audiences were then, used to be mixed audiences, and then were not afterwards. Um, the same was true of the entire downtown community. Um, the networking, once the musicians started coming in, some were well known, some were local. What I didn't know at the time, and only learned, months later, that there were at least 3 excellent music schools within an hour and a half of here. Butler University, incredible music school, very active at the time on jazz and classical. Indiana University, Jordan School of Music. Dr. David Baker was the head of the jazz studies down there. And then it would have been U-Indy on the south side. And I forget, it was like Indiana Central, I think was the original name, and it's now U-Indy, those 3. Since I've added Marian University, what's the other one I'm thinking of? In any case, 4 or 5 that were there. And then that word of mouth of, I'm playing here, come and see me. And then approaching me, can we play on another night? Or are you wanting to expand, and so on. That networking happened both within Chatterbox, not at my initiation, but my encouragement once people came to me. I didn't even know the resources. And as they did, they're going to school, they're instructors, associate professors, grad students, and so on. Then they go on to other places, and they go to Chicago or New York or LA or Boston or San Francisco, and then maybe they go to London, and maybe they go to Paris, and maybe they go whatever. And so that's how it really started. Again, no grand plan, just an understanding that I really didn't know the business and I had to let it grow on its own with some guardrails, not very tight guardrails. It's just like, let's do this. We've had numbers of musicians that have been in the city playing elsewhere, of course, to come and sit in. The most notable on the jazz side certainly would be Wynton Marsalis, and the late, great Chuck Workman, who was the radio disc jockey for, I think it was WTPI or something. I forget the call letters of it, but he was the jazz disc jockey on the radio, a former Crispus Attucks graduate, and I believe music student down at IU under David Baker as well. He was promoting all of these things and promoted those concerts. Now this is, I think the first time Wynton came in was when, it was probably 30 years ago, 25 or 30, last century. And Chuck Workman had facilitated, then emceed a concert across the street at Old National Center. And he invited Wynton to go across and play in his band to do so. And we were a later music venue anyway, so we're starting like at midnight at that time. Their concert is over like at 10:30 or 11. We were there for the meet and greet post show, which was really fabulous. And then the band begins to come over. My band is already there setting up. And it was funny because the drummer, and I actually forget who it was, maybe it was Matt Harold Cardwell, I don't remember. He was unloading his vehicle with drum cases, which of course are voluminous. And this guy comes over and he's carrying a music case, you can tell. He said, "Can I help you with that?" He says, "Oh yeah, sure, man, come on in." So that person picks up one of the drummer's kits to bring in and sets on the stage. And the drummer, our drummer, stands up and looks and said, "You're Wynton Marsalis. You just helped me bring in my drum kit." He said, "Yeah, man, we're all musicians. We're all musicians," which was really great. And so they sat in, and members of his band also sat in with that particular group. And then occasionally, I think he's been there twice to play, but his band members, when they've played in the city, have known us and they come to sit in. And I'm sure they sit in at Jazz Kitchen too. But we're a known commodity for traveling musicians. And even more so now as the Broadway shows travel, there's a core group of musicians. Many are hired locally. And then there's that connection from New York or LA where those shows are coming from across the street from us. So that continued to expand the notoriety and the information and knowing the connection that many musicians are coming there. So that was probably the most important on the jazz side. We had a really tremendous event, unplanned, from the Rolling Stones when they came to Indianapolis for their Steel Wheels tour. It was December 1989, and they were staying at the best hotel we had, which was called the Canterbury. I think it's Le Méridien now. But that was the best hotel we had, and they were staying there. They had a dinner planned that day. It was a Tuesday. They had a Wednesday and a Thursday concert in the, I think it was still the Hoosier Dome, maybe not yet the RCA Dome. It was the inflatable top dome that the Colts came, and we built it without a football team. In any case, the concert was there the next 2 days, and they were chilling between concerts, and they went out to dinner at a great Italian restaurant that doesn't exist anymore called Benvenuti's. They were directed by the concierge at the hotel, who was a regular customer of ours, Mary Rose. And it just so happened that the limo driver, Scott Sanders, one of the limo drivers, was a regular customer of ours too. Because we were the only fun thing downtown, people knew about us at all levels. So I get a call from Mary Rose on their wall dial phone. "Hey, David, it's Mary Rose. I've got Mick Jagger and Ron Wood and some other people wanting to hear some music after dinner. Who's playing tonight?" I said, "It's Mark Radway. How many people do you have there as far as customers?" I said, "I don't know, 11, 12, something like that." I was training a new bartender whose sister already worked there, twin sister already worked there, the Wellenkamp sisters. She had been a customer, but we were just going through the routine of training, this is where the Budweiser is, this is where the Corona is, et cetera, et cetera. So Mary Rose on the phone says, "Can you please ask everyone there, don't ask for autographs, just be chill, don't take pictures." And of course, then you had to have a real camera with you if you were going to take pictures. But in any case, that was the entree. And then I went and talked to everyone there. And I said, that was concierge Mary Rose. And she said that the Rolling Stones are coming in a little bit to hear music. Just be cool about it. Don't ask for autographs. And they just said, "Bullshit. You're just lying to us." And this was, as I said, in 1989, winter. So there weren't very many people there, of course, at all. And it wasn't 15 minutes later, 2 white limousines pull up out front. And everybody goes, "Oh, shit." He's telling the truth. So they came in, I think it was 7 or 8 total people. It was Mick Jagger and Ron Wood, the two of the Stones, and then a couple of women, a couple of bodyguards, and so on. So my customers truly did behave themselves. They kind of moved aside so they could have 2 tables together. And I think it was table 3, 4, 5, that kind of thing, in the middle there, not the first 2 tables, probably 4 and 5. And the band continued to play, which is why they were there, not to come and sit in or crash the party or whatever, just to hear the music. And they were really, really impressed with the band. When the band took a break, the band stood up, and they had musician to musician conversation. And they tried to get a hold of Charlie Watts. And I didn't know this till actually years later. Charlie had always had a jazz group outside of the Rolling Stones, either during or maybe even before too, nonetheless, but they were trying to get a hold of him so that he could come down and listen, just to say, these guys are really good. We're in Indianapolis, but we have a great band here in front of us. So they used my wall phone, and they tried the front desk, they tried the bar, they tried the room, and Charlie wasn't there. And then they said, okay, I mean, nobody had cell phones, mobile phones, anything like that. And then one of the bodyguards went out to the limo, and of course there was a car phone in the limo, and they tried the same sort of sequence, didn't find him, and whatever. And meanwhile, our band starts playing again, and everyone's still being cool. And then my customers, they say, could we use your wall phone? So they go up to the wall phone, and of course they're dialing their friends. And of course, that was pretty obvious to the people, my guests from the Stones entourage. And they finally said, yeah, we're going to be deluged here. Let's just stay a little while longer. They were there about an hour, and they asked my training bartender for the tab, and it was $25. And the bodyguard gave her a 50 and said, keep the change. So she got a 100% tip. Got to wait on the Rolling Stones entourage, including Mick Jagger and Ron Wood. And that's a memorable story for her. So that was the story. They got into the limousines after that. And then we had 30 people that came in about 20 minutes later. As far as phone network, it was a phone tree kind of thing that people were doing. And we hadn't even time to clear the tables. So the people that were there grabbed the empties. So we had bottled water at the time, the Wisconsin water, La Croix, and it was in glass bottles. We had Budweiser, Heineken, that kind of thing. And so the group that was there grabbed the bottles, which was great. It was fun. And that was the memorable story. It's a great story, which would be one of the memorabilia things that was written by Will Higgins, eventually a writer for the Star, and he wrote about that story. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek and fun, and we have that blown up behind the bar, and it's really cool. Other lesser knowns as far as the music, but most of the time they didn't come to sit in or jam. They came to listen or be part of it and see what was going on. And really between Wynton Marsalis and his band members, that would be the biggest on the jazz side, and then the spectators, Mick Jagger and Ron Wood. Probably the products of Indiana Avenue, which mostly went to Crispus Attucks, the segregated all-black high school. Their teachers were also all black, and they really couldn't get a job in any of the other schools in Indianapolis. So they were really upper level educated for English and math and Latin and music and so on. So the kids that went there got incredible educations at all levels along the way. They were also encouraged to go and hang out at the clubs along Indiana Avenue. Not to get a drink or get drunk or anything like that, but to listen and learn from their elders that were there playing at the various clubs that were there. And the products of that sort of system were Pookie Johnson, Alonzo Pookie Johnson, Jimmy Coe, Mary Moss, and then even later Clifford Ratliff now, and Billy Myers. He went to Broad Ripple, but again, it was this nurturing of the jazz community, basically at that time African American, that expanded and were then educating, passing on their learning and so on, without college in many cases, or they were encouraged to go to college. One of the great trumpet players, Perez Whittet, played there regularly, but Dick Dickinson gave him part of the start to be there. He was a jazz drummer, went to IU, white guy. He was real taskmaster, and a lot of people didn't care for him, but if you got within his band or invited to come and sit in, you learned a lot. Rob Dixon will credit Dick Dickinson all the way. Many of the musicians that are now here were nurtured by Dick Dickinson, both because he had a teaching mentality. He also had a jazz radio show on our public radio. I think it was WIAN then before it became WFYI. And so it was jazz history, graduate level, when you listen to his radio program. A lot of people said he talked too much, but it's like, no, he's teaching you. You know, he's reading the liner notes and he's doing this. And they said, well, we just want him to play music. He did, but that was part of that nurturing, really, along the way. So many people have been part of that connection through various musicians that take it upon themselves to pass along the specialties that they know, let you play, let you make mistakes, let you learn, let you bounce off those guardrails of, in this case, of jazz, which was really, really fabulous. So those were probably the biggest ones. We had the Hampton sisters there, was a part of a family band, and Perez Whitted is the son of the bass player Virtue. I guess I would have to verify that. I'm pretty sure that's true. None of the Hamptons are there, but they played at the Chatterbox as a jazz duo, or first a trio, and then a duo. It was Virtue, Alitra, and Carmelita. Carmelita was a tiny woman, but played a baritone sax and had to almost stand at the end of the stage when you're playing the sax and you're doing this, when the bari sax is almost as tall as you are. It helped that there was the end of the stage for her to lean over. And it was piano and bass then, so it was a great trio. Even Indianapolis Monthly did a real nice feature on them when they were at Chatterbox, so it was really cool. The various other universities now evolving into great international acclaim is Ball State, led by Mark Buselli, trumpet player. He's the head of jazz studies there, and then very many of the other musicians are up there and teaching at university and so on. So that network continues. Ball State, I don't know how long ago they started their jazz music program, but they have an incredible program now and real excellent products of students coming out from there, which that was the fifth one I could not remember. So that's kind of that story, but it's network. I'm sure there are other industries that do that, nurture and so on, but this is the one that I experienced and know about. Yeah, they still have to be 19, but yes. So we have a fabulous musician now. She's the head of jazz at Marian University. Sean O'Connor is her current last name. When she was 13, 14 years old, she was taking lessons from Frank Glover, clarinet player at that time, reed player, saxophone now, still plays at Chatterbox. He and Claude Sifferlin, the phenomenal jazz piano player, had a duo for more than 2 decades at Chatterbox. Sean was taking lessons from Frank Glover, and her mother would drive her down, I forget where they lived, set up a lawn chair outside the front window, give her a sleeping bag for warmth to watch Frank Glover play through the window and learn, which was fabulous. Now, she couldn't come in. She was way too young. This was before we had our patio, which we had starting in 99. So this was way before that. And then we would bring her water or coffee or stuff like that to keep her warm and so on. And then Frank, on a break, would go out and chat with her and talk to her and said, did you notice this was what I was doing and so on. It was a real, again, nurturing along the way. And when Sean got to have her driver's license at 16, she would do the same thing until, and now she's the head of jazz studies there at Marian University. And I think it's the Symphonic Youth Orchestra too. I believe she's the head of that. But her music education was nurtured by another one of the musicians, Frank Glover, and his incredible duo mate, piano player Claude Sifferlin. Certainly, and it really would go back before my support at that level, as many neighborhoods probably in the world, but also knowing neighborhoods in United States, when they had been run down or essentially abandoned, again, the white flight to the suburbs, there's still retail stores that were built in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and they became either underutilized or vacant. That's where art galleries go in the early days of a downtown rebirth. We had incredible political leadership with 8 years of Richard Lugar, then 16 years of William Hudnut, to understand that the downtown had deteriorated and need to be rebuilt. So there were many initiatives to help neighborhoods come through. But the galleries were nurtured by Scott Keller, who I talked about before, because the only building he didn't own was the one I was in. He owned the others, and they had the same issue, but they had apartments upstairs. Their development thesis was to do apartments upstairs, therefore it would create a demand for a retail kind of tenant downstairs, and it would go together. I mean, that's a basic development to this day, certainly. That's how it works. And art galleries were going in. We had Patrick King Contemporary Art Gallery. We had Mark Rushman Gallery. We had the 431 Gallery, which was cooperative of Heron School of Art graduates. Francie and Steve Stoller had a gallery, and the Cunninghams, Kate and Jim Cunningham, they had one 300 block. So there were like 7 galleries on my block and the 300 and the 400 block, which were cultural things for Heron School of Art, well known actually around the world, certainly, and their people, their artists would begin to be shown. So that was the start of my cultural connection. And then in being asked to volunteer for my architectural firm, I discovered and found out about a group called Young Audiences, which is now Arts for Learning. It's been around for over 50 years, and they sponsored artists going into schools all over the state of Indiana. So I met Kathy Morris through there, who was one of the early artists, and very many other of the artists that are still playing for them and demonstrating their both love of music, how to play music, what it means to you, and it's adding the culture to the schools. So I was on that board of directors for quite some time. I also became interested in theater just because it was happening. There was theater across the street at the Athenaeum. The American Cabaret was there. And then there was a new development for the building on Washington Street with Indiana Repertory Theater. So I became aware of that, involved with that. When they were opening it, I went to very many of the opening things, and then the IRT moved. I forget if the name changed, but IRT, Indiana Repertory Theater, was at the Athenaeum, and then they moved to their brand new restored historic place over there on Washington Street. So this was all happening in my backyard around me, and I was aware because I was reading the newspaper, I was reading the Indianapolis Business Journal, I was finding out about this. Politically, everyone was being encouraged to do this, and things were facilitated. Perfect storms were happening even federally. The bicentennial, 1976, they enacted many historic tax credits that added and helped facilitate historic preservation. So you got an additional 25% if you did historic preservation correctly and didn't tear the building down. It had to be in halfway decent shape, but many were really on the margins. And that tax credit helped things happening. So I became involved with historic preservation at that level too. The theater of Phoenix Theater, which was founded by Brian Fonseca, first was Broad Ripple Theater, right up here on Broad Ripple Avenue, was a little storefront. And because I was interested in theater, I went to see some of the shows, and I found out that Brian was thinking about moving, and Scott Keller, again, had bought the Ambassador apartment building, his developers, which is right behind our main library now. And the Phoenix Theater moved to a storefront down there on the ground level. And I started going to shows there. They were fantastic. And then, I don't know if the sequence is correct, but Scott Keller was inherited a church building in Chatham Arch, which is on Park and St. Clair. And that was then restored to become the Phoenix Theater. Another architect friend of mine, Jim Lingenfelter, and I were on that board of directors. We joined boards of directors because we wanted to help, and we didn't have a lot of money, but we had, sweat equity and labor we could add to that. And his and my contribution to that board of directors would do all the architecture work to convert the church to a theater, upstairs and then eventually downstairs as well. So again, then that sort of, I was woven into the theater community too. And those artists like painting, they like music and so on. The network again began to develop. And then one of the early young audiences group was also Dance Kaleidoscope, which is 53 years old now. And one of the two founding members, Cherry Jaffe and Ginger Hall, are still involved with Dance Kaleidoscope and helping as using their names as the funding source for new choreographers. But they were dancing in the 70s, and I wanted to go see them. And they were in IRT space there, and then they became part of that network that I went to see their dances wherever they were going to dance. And it was just fabulous. So that's the dance woven in. My ballet connection is through individuals, but later, because there have been multiple ballet companies. This now one, I think, is the school is 15 years old, but the ballet company is like 6 or 7 now. And so those networks have been how I became involved and how I continue to be involved. And I bring friends that have never been, or friends that want to go and just don't know how, or whatever. So that's the thread that's connected me. But again, the significant person, Scott Keller. I mean, he had the bigger picture of how cities get developed, and he had funding through his partners and also family funding, and it was all part of that. And he spent that money well. He's still around. He's a world-renowned antiques appraiser here in the city. Well, I've taken tap lessons through Dance Kaleidoscope, Vivian Michaels. And it was a drop-in class. You would pay like a class card. You essentially buy 6 classes, and when you come, they punch it out. And I went with my friends, Julie Rhodes and Michelle Milani, and then met other people there. But we took lessons. It's always something I wanted to do. I'm still fascinated by it, but they have adjusted. So you got to go these many times in a row, and I just can't do that. My schedule doesn't permit that. But I'm still tapping at home. I'm saving tap stuff that I see on Facebook, and I have my tap shoes. And actually, when the Chatterbox is closed, I can tap up and down because the bar stools are on the bar and the tables are over to the side. And that's a good tapping floor. As deteriorated as it is, it's a good tapping floor. The base of what everything is written on or attached to was there when I came, and probably there decades before that too. But again, in doing development and so on, I was very aware of the change when the grocery store, down the block, now it's Needler's, was Marsh, before that Amalia's. It was a Sears building built in the 1930s on the National Register of Historic Places. Incredible, beautiful limestone and significant yellow brick that Sears utilized all over the country. They had decided to do white flight to the suburbs. All the perimeter shopping centers were either totally developed or being developed, and they were going to close the downtown store and move to their suburbs. And they had, I think, 2 branches in 2 of our suburban shopping malls. We were horrified. I mean, I was on the neighborhood board of directors at the time, Riley Area Revitalization Program, that we just couldn't. I'm on the phone to Chicago corporate Sears. Well, they wouldn't talk to me. I said, well, you can't pull out. This is an anchor of retail to our, I said, we're doing this all over the country. We didn't single you out. We are doing this. This is our now new corporate policy. Well, and then facilitating this is during a Hudnut administration. They know this is horrible too, to have this huge building with incredible parking lot and other outbuildings that were part of it to now be vacant. And they had to figure out how to get an anchor in there. And of course, people know in development circles that there are food deserts. We were a food desert downtown. And the suggestion, appropriate, was that we need to get a grocery store in there. It's a retail footprint and floor plan, so it would work for a grocery store, but who's going to do that? There weren't that many people. There were less than 5,000 people, let's say between 3,500 and 4,500 people that live downtown within a mile or 2 miles. So no grocery store in the world would put something there. You need to be in the middle of a big population hub, concentrated hub. But we had a family-owned grocery store, Joe and Danny O'Malley's father and son, that made the commitment and pledged to the city to do that. One of my friends, Lee Allig, was a developer that facilitated that, and various people within Metropolitan Development Commission and Hudnut's administration, so city administration, helped put a package together so that they could move in there and become the anchor for the O'Malley's market, which was that saved the whole neighborhood. Had it been vacant and nobody wanted to go in there, you couldn't get another Sears. All the big box things were going perimeter around 465. We needed that, and that helped facilitate the growth of residential. At the same time, this was a little bit before, again, during historic preservation tax credits, the Historic Landmarks Foundation was created in the late 60s with one of the architects that I worked for, one of the partners in the firm that I worked for, Raul McLaughlin. So it was Colonel Lilly and Raul created this. They also then, at that same time, during political administration, I think it was during Lugar, they created Historic Preservation Commission as a subset of the Department of Metropolitan Development. So within the city. So they were helping facilitate Lockerbie Square development, and then Chatham Arch, and then St. Joseph, all the tight ones, all around the churches, and help facilitate the city, the development of the Sears building into O'Malley's Market. That continued development. Everybody then could develop a home. Scott Keller's entities, his partners, they could make an apartment change to a condo and sell a condo because you could now walk to a grocery store. And the restoration of Indiana Repertory Theater was there. And before too long, Circle Theater was converted into the symphony space. This is all happening because people laid the groundwork and foundation to be able to come out and do all of those things. When Sears closed, they had a closing party, and many of them were already my customers. So they adjourned from the closing party. Actually, 2 of them are still my customers. Closing party, they came over to the Chatterbox to continue the celebration. And they all had name tags on, that kind of thing. And, I'm there helping, I'm behind the bar, we have bartenders, that so on and so forth. And they said, what can we do to kind of commemorate this closing? Can we stick our name tags on the refrigerator? I said, sure. Well, he said, well, I lost mine. Can we sign it? Well, of course, as an architect, you have a Sharpie all the time. And so at my office, at that time, my private office was upstairs. So I went upstairs and got a Sharpie. They started signing the refrigerator with either their name tags or their names or a date or whatever. And that was the beginning of that. And before too long, it didn't matter to me. And it's like an element of personal ownership if you sign something like that. And that's what people wanted to do. And we always had Sharpies available. So it's like, yeah, here, sure, go ahead, do those kinds of things. And that's what really started it. Now, virtually everything that's on the shelves or on the wall or whatever are gifts to us. Pictures or memorabilia or things that would fit, and everything has a story. The big ball of aluminum foil, the stencils that are on the wall, the outside wall that is shared with the parking lot on the other side, the various, the shark jaws that are up there, all of these little things were given by people that felt, number one, a pride of ownership and comfortable being there and wanted to contribute something because they were regulars. So Signature started when Sears closed, and then it continued. We've always had, because of our uniqueness and the international allure and notoriety of jazz music, international customers that come in because of our large corporations that are here, Lilly and Roche and so on. Well, if somebody there knows about us and they're visiting from Taiwan or Korea or Russia or Norway or Sweden, they would give us some foreign money that is up many layers of it now, where our point of sale, our cash register space is. So that continued. Now, the dollar bills that are up there now, I'm not a fan of those, but I understand the whole reason. Those happened much later, where people would sign a dollar bill and attach it to the wall with Scotch tape and stuff like that. When we were confronted with COVID, I asked all my bartenders, we were all getting unemployment during that time, and we couldn't be open. We weren't a restaurant, we couldn't serve food. You can't have inside live music because, you'd spread that COVID virus and so on, and we understood that. Everyone was getting unemployment, but I asked them, my bartenders, I could take down all those dollars, because I've talked to the bank, and bring them to the bank, and they would convert them to spendable dollars because they're defaced and they have to be destroyed, but it's still worth $1. If you take it to a bank, you'll get a new dollar, and they just destroy them. They said, no, we don't want it. Just leave it up there. Just leave it up there. And I figured, I did a rough count, it was probably only $300 or $400 in actual dollar bills up there. Nobody puts a 20. And I don't know the denominations or the value of the denominations of the foreign currency. I was going to leave that up anyway. So those little things, again, are what people feel like, oh, we love this place, can we commemorate it? We had our first date here, or, and I heard that just last weekend, and we've been together for 15 years, or, first time I came here was with my ex, and now I'm with this person, that kind of thing. So it's a comfortable, divey space. Jazz music is the allure, and the fact that people can become really comfortable, every kind of people that you can imagine that you would see in the world come there. All of our customers feel that comfort level to be able to walk in the door. They're protected, they're enjoying themselves, and everybody's cool about who you are, what you want to be. You're there like everybody else is. You're sitting like elbow to elbow, butt to butt, along the wall or the other. It's like we tend to tell people, it's just like a European space. You'll sit with somebody you don't know, but you probably know them by the end of the evening, that kind of thing. And that's been, number one, the philosophy, kind of the same guardrail thing that I've talked about. Just allow that to happen and welcome everybody there. As I was saying earlier, we were all on unemployment, but it was much cheaper for me to be closed and pay the core utilities to keep heat. You didn't even, well, there was some electricity, but not much air conditioning. We cranked it way up. Property taxes, insurance, all of those expenses were ongoing. but it was way cheaper for me to do that than try to open up with the restrictions that I believed in, that you shouldn't be this close to someone else. You couldn't have a vocalist in front without having a 10 or 12-foot distance between vocal or horn, because particulate matter is coming out of your lungs or the horn or whatever. I mean, it's all science. It's true. And so it made so much sense to be closed to do that. Now, I had to borrow from my retirement accounts. I had no income. We had again, unemployment, which was generous at the time. There were extra things that were happening, way more than just basic unemployment. And it was because of the COVID crisis in the city. So just maintaining that, I mean, I didn't have extra money to do restoration or renovation. I just it was really a depressing time for everybody, including me. Not really knowing how long it was going to be. You know, we thought, oh, maybe 2 or 3 months, and it's like it just kept going. We ended up being closed for 532 total days, and we didn't reopen until they allowed full occupancy inside. I could have opened earlier, but the restrictions, again, the 10 to 12 feet from the front of the stage, musicians all with a mask, no more than 3 people up there, 1 or 2 bartenders, and then 6 feet between people, not 6 feet between a table. So you have a table that's a 30-inch diameter, and you have a person, then you have 6 feet, then you have another person, and so we could have gotten maybe 12 to 15 people in there, and it just wouldn't have worked. So at the end, we poured out, I don't know, thousands of dollars of beer. Liquor keeps. We had to check the wine because it was in the basement and controlled and lower temperature than upstairs. But we had to toss, well, maybe not thousands in beer, but hundreds of beer in the coolers and all that kind of business. We just couldn't sell it, because it was both out of date and would not have lasted that long. You don't let it go that far. You always rotate your stock and so on. So it was really both devastating in starting back up again, and tenuous, because okay, we've waited long enough, longer than most places that were restaurants that could be selling carry out the front door. But it finally worked, and there was no going back on that, no government change. It was solid and straight ahead. Yep, we're comfortable. You can do this. Get your COVID vaccines. If you feel uncomfortable, you can wear a mask. You can not go there because it's close and intimate space. And many people still have not been back or not been back since COVID. And occasionally they'll come by and say, it's still too crowded. That is an appropriate fear to have for anybody who might be worried about those kinds of things. And we grew up differently as a culture, United States culture. I mean, if you were to see which, newsreels or pictures, Asian countries, people wear masks all the time. When they're feeling like they don't want to get sick or more sick, or they don't want to spread their sickness, they're on public transportation. We're in our own car all the time, so we didn't think about that. But they're a culture that pays a lot more attention to public health courtesies along the way. And there are still some people, thankfully, that do that. They'll come in the Chatterbox, but they wear a mask, and when they're outside, they take it off. No big deal. It's like, no, you're welcome to do that. We don't think badly of you or think it's odd or weird. We understand you're protecting yourself or protecting everybody else. So that was the big COVID thing, 532 days. And as we got the word out, upon reopening, people started coming in again, gingerly, what's like, and each of the days, I tried to post what band would have been playing and a potential for people to send money to them through a Venmo or a PayPal or whatever. And initially, I think it worked pretty well, maybe through the first year. And then it kind of died off because people are frustrated. It's like, what are we going to do? How can we continue to live this way? But the band started coming back, which was great. And because of what we all learned, cashless things were more important. All we had was a card reader and a cash drawer before that. But many, many more people they're not handling cash. Because it is potentially dirty. It has COVID. Are you microwaving your cash at night to kill the germs? I mean, you can do that, and people did do that. So we made the change to go to more electronic ways to take payment. The bands learned too, as they were beginning to play outside where um, they could have a QR code or a PayPal or a Venmo or whatever that they would attach to a guitar case or a tip bucket or something like that. So they learned the way to electronically receive tips directly into a bank account. So those are the kinds of changes that we've adopted and put together, which makes the most sense. We still have a good bit of cash because we pay the bands in cash at night and we tip out our servers in cash. But for the most part, our deposits are electronic, which is, again, that evolution that we made. It was a significant cost, as you can imagine, and training. And I still, to this day, don't really know how to run it, but that's okay, I don't. I have plenty of staff to be able to do those things. So, I mean, and that's sort of the evolution of COVID that has brought people back in. And within the first 6 months or so, we got back to regular, and there was pent up demand for live music venues and live music. So it was better than it was before COVID because that pent up demand, and people were, there were people writing stories about us and Jazz Kitchen, other places, other entertainment venues. And it's like, I remember going down to the Hi-Fi in Fountain Square, and they built an entire outside stage in order to be able to allow people to be outside and still have music. I went to the Phoenix Theater, the new Phoenix that's over on Illinois, 700 block, and they had shipping containers that were created into a new stage outdoors on their parking lot, and a small shipping container, which was their bar. So I went to theater and brought friends of mine to theater over there at the Phoenix, also the Indianapolis Fringe, IF theater that built just pre-COVID, a black box, but it had also a garage door that would open up to the outside into their little patio, driveway, parking space, event space. And so I would bring people out there. It's November and it's cold. Everybody's got coats on, but people want to see live performance. And that's how it survived, and that's how people survived. And people are continuing to do that. And they became much more aware of what they missed during COVID, and then started to go back again. And there's still some coming back, as I said. If I'm outside at the door doing our music charge on Friday or Saturday, many people come by and say, hello, we're really glad you reopened. I haven't been back yet. I'm still uncomfortable with closed spaces like that. But I said, you can sit on the patio. And they said, oh, we didn't think about that. So they can do that too. So it's like, that's part of that evolution and part of the change since COVID. Yes, certainly. It was our regular historic St. Patrick's Day sing-along, which I've done for over 40 years. And I have an incredible piano player, Sean Baker. I've had a few during the years as they've retired and moved along. Sean Baker is my current music director for Christmas and St. Patrick's Day. Because Friday, it was the 14th, they had the parade that day. We always do the sing-along post-parade because people are out and they're partying and they have the day off, and generally they make it on a Friday so they have the weekend off. So it's a whole weekend of St. Patty's Day. We had just finished that, and I think we didn't have jazz scheduled later on. I can't compete with St. Patrick's Day crowd. So I was finished, Sean and I were finished by 9, and we were taking care of people. The patio was full. It was summer weather. It was really warm, like 80-ish at that time, and that early in the middle of March. People were coming in and out, and we had to-go cups, the plastic stuff, this, that, and the other. And we were really busy. And I'm there, and 2 of my bartenders are working behind the bar and going in and out to the patio and so on. And four people, two couples, I don't know if they were couples, but two men, two women came in and started horrifically misgendering one of my bartenders, Autumn. Taunting, angry stuff. And I was oblivious. I just sung for 3.5 hours. I wasn't paying attention. Autumn handled it and refused service to those people. They were belligerent and nasty. We don't know if they were even drunk. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But you treat us that way, you're not going to be served no matter what. So after not much in the way of argument or problem, they left, not even 3 minutes kind of thing. And then they go outside, and I heard later, I wasn't outside, that they were complaining to my patio people. Well, that whatever wouldn't serve us, refused us service, da, da, da. And everybody turns to us like, come on, get a life. What are you doing? We feel as though we were not targeted ahead of time, but targeted because we have a pride flag outside. And we were the only venue open in that block for, nighttime entertainment. The retail's closed and the restaurants are, a quarter block away and whatever. So we had always had the pride flag out there. We feel as though that's why we were targeted. This particular person comes back in, videotaping on the way in, to then sort of scream at Autumn, "You're not serving us because we have MAGA hats on? We're Trump people." And Autumn reacted, "We're not serving you, just get out of here." And that was the viral video, not the whole thing, just that second entrance there. And then they left. We thought it was a confrontation. We didn't even call the police. Hadn't risen to that level. Somebody truly doing it. They were just being nasty customers. They refused service. They came back and then they left. And then it went viral the next day. It was really vicious. The viral story that went with it, that wasn't the whole story. What was captured on the video was the truth. But what wasn't captured is what led up to it in the first place, and very intentionally. I don't believe she even videotaped that part. They came back to do the confrontation on video very intentionally, to then target us and then do that. And it was really horrific. Our social media just exploded, horrific threats. And our internal people have been able to manage that now so that we have moved it away from a certain thing. We've closed certain social media. We've upgraded our website. All of these elements were in response to that. We still are reluctant to answer the telephone, the landline inside, because every other call is a threat. It's a really vicious threat. Violence, we're going to come, well, maybe. It won't ever mean anything. It won't ever come to anything. But just last week, two elected political officials were assassinated in their home in Minneapolis by some wacko. And it only takes one outside the lines to do that. We have now on-site security at select times that we've never had to have before in 43 years. We're in process of installing over the next month and a half an inside security system with cameras. We had fire alarms and a break-in alarm. No cameras. No, we've never needed that. And this is the response because it's an incredible, horrific new culture that we have to deal with, and all because we are with open arms welcoming every kind of person that comes into the Chatterbox. So, be that as it may, over that next week or so, that didn't die down. It didn't die down. But what evolved is the incredible positive outpouring. Customers coming in, sending cards, letters from all over the world, because it went all over the world, in support, money to the bartenders and the cards. people coming in. We were an hour away from here going somewhere else. We knew about this, heard this, we got to come in and support you. Still happening today. Not in those large numbers, but it's talked about weekly to us, to our bartenders. Positive from the negative. And we truthfully haven't had negative come within the bar since that time. So at least fingers crossed that won't happen. And because it was, 4 months ago, there's some dying down of the rabble-rousers that want to do that. But we're still ready. We'll be prepared. And from that day forward, we had to totally reconsider our safety and us feeling safe about what might happen to our people, our employees, our customers, and then lastly, the building. I don't know how many firebomb threats we've gotten, and some of those threats are from people that have been in there because their references are accurate. So it's like, Anyway, so that's my emotional story. But we are surviving, we're resisting, we're persisting, and we have incredible support from our community up and down the avenue. Now, the greater concern that just evolved this past week was during Pride Fest and the Pride Parade. It was absolutely fabulous. No threats, no issues, only positivity. And again, we heard people, because this is one of the biggest pride parades certainly in Indiana, central Indiana. Many people came in for this, and then they purposely came to Chatterbox to say something, to spend money, to support, give emotional, physical, financial support to our business. And it was a record day for us, and that was really fabulous. There are so many musicians to share that have contributed to our space. Monica Herzig, her husband Peter Keenley, Kathy Morris, who I mentioned earlier, Claude Sifferlin, Frank Glover, Dick Dickinson, all the people that he brought in and nurtured, and to Josh Kaufman was nurtured by Dick Dickinson as well as a vocalist, and he was singing in the I think Potbelly Sandwich Store on the Circle. It started to come in and hang at Chatterbox. He just sang the national anthem for the last Pacer game I went to. And phenomenal guy, but he certainly, in talking to him, he'll credit Dick Dickinson for helping to nurture his jazz side, because Josh knew music from the other side, but didn't know the jazz. And he's an incredible vocalist and musician as well. So those are, all the longtime names, people played forever and ever and ever, and continue to. I mentioned Bill Myers earlier, regular from Broad Ripple on the entertainment side, was in New York City and film school and playing out there and acting out there, and now back home to his roots in Indianapolis, theater side, Beverly Roche, who was just in this fabulous play called Wit, longtime friend, past bartender in theater, and I saw Bill Myers up there because they're both from Broad Ripple High School. And all of these networks continue to be nurtured, and the touchstone, the anchor in many ways, foundation for these relationships to continue is through Chatterbox.